Section 2.2, organizing qualitative data. Qualitative, the one doesn't have to do with numbers. Quantitative, quantity has to do with numbers, which is going to be section 2.3. So what this is about is basically, if you look at the title, it's just a method or methods we're going to introduce here to help us organize data, a given data. And how are we going to organize these data is using what we call frequency. Frequency tells us how often something has occurred within the data. And then you will see, because it's qualitative, there are not going to be numbers involved within the data itself. So we do a frequency distribution of qualitative data as the listing of the distinct values. Distinct means different values and their frequencies. So we count how often each data set has occurred, and then that's called the frequency. So for example, if we look at this table here, they are talking about Democratic, Republican, others. That's all I see, 3 of them. So what are we going to do? We're going to organize this data. And how do we organize this data? First thing is, we have 3 things we need to organize: Democratic, Republican, and other. So these are the 3 things we need to deal with. And then the way we do this is we start going one by one. So the first one is Democratic. So we use what we call tallies to keep track of that. So like one Democratic. Let's say Democrats are here, Republican here, and others here. Then the next one, other. So we put 1. Democratic again, other here. Democratic again, Republican, Republican, other. So that's 4 of them so far for other. Republican, it's here. And then when it comes to Republican again, we use / like this to count, to give us 5. So that's, we go by 5s. And then we do the same thing for Republican and move on and on. The next one, Republican, Democrat, so we start a new one, and then Republican, so that's 5. And so that tells me by the time I finish going over each one of them, then I can go back and count the tallies. And then the total number will be the frequency. Total number will be the frequency. So that's what happens. So Democrats, we have 5, 5, 10, and 3, 13. Republicans 5, 10, 15, 18, and the next one 5 and 4, that's 9. A total of 40 of them. And then to test it, what you can do, you can count how many we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 in this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 this way. 5 times 8 is 40. So that tells me that we did not miss any or overcount any. Now what are we going to do with this data? Why did we do it this way? Because it helps us to present it in a different way. So it will help us to present in a different way. To present it so we can organize it. And what happens here is, the next thing is how to find what we call relative frequency. Relative frequency, we're going to find the relative frequency for each one of them. And to do so, we take the frequency of each one of them divided by the total. Frequency of this divided by the total. Frequency of this divided by the total. And then you can get the decimal part of it, which we're going to see in a minute. Here you go. So 13 over 40, as you can see, is 0.325. 18 over 40 is 0.45, and 9 over 40 is 0.225. We usually leave it in decimal form. Now, what do we need this for? This will help us to construct what we call a pie chart or pie graph. To do so, we take these percents. So the first one is 0.325, the decimal, and convert to percent by multiplying by 100. So you move the decimal point to the right 2 steps. 32.5%. The next one, 0.450 times 100, that's 45%. The next one is 0.225 times 100, that's 22.5%. So we are going to use these percents. If you add them up, that should give us 100%. We're going to use these percents to construct what we call a pie chart. And what is that about? It's a circular graph that is divided into sectors or width shape. So we call them width shape or sectors. So we are going to go with, if I want to graph it here, say this is the center of the disk. 45 is the largest. So 50 would be half, right? Like 50 would be like this. So 45, maybe we'll make it a little bit smaller. So this covers the 45, the Republican. The next one is 32. 32 is more than 22. So maybe, let's say I want to do it this way. That's 22%. This is for Democratic. And the last one is the other. So always has to start at the center of the disk. And that's what we have down here. As you can see, the pink one for Republican, Democratic is 32 for the green, and the other one 22.5 for others. And I'm sure you see this not necessarily every day, but a lot of times while you're reading an article or somewhere in the news, you see this. When you see these things, it makes things easier for a researcher to study. Sometimes we run a survey and then we look at the graphs. When they say 50% they said yes, 50% said no, or you have 80% said yes, 10% no, and 10 don't care or none. So the pie graph helps us to see the results in a better way. One other last thing here to talk about is the what we call it bar graphs. Bar graphs, the way the bar graphs work. So bar graph or bar chart. What is this? Well, this is just like the XY plane. What goes in here is on the horizontal axis is the distinct values of the quality that we have. So what they're talking about, three things here: Republicans, Democratic, and others. So Republicans, Democrats, and others. Try to make it equally spaced. And on the vertical line, that's where we put either the percent or decimal, whichever it's easier for you. And then this always contains the frequency or relative frequency. If you put the frequency, you just go with the numbers. If you want to use relative frequency, then you use decimals or percents. It depends what the question is asking. So if I want to do the percents, like relative frequency, so I want to see what frequencies we have. We have 22.5, 32, and 45. You can go by an increment of 5, let's say. So 5%, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So this is 50%, like that, 45%, and all the way down. So the first one, the Republicans, was 45.0%. So you draw a vertical bar all the way up to that point, and then when the bar you draw it, make sure it's so the letter R is in the middle of the bar. So this represents the Republicans, 45%. For D, Democratic, 32. So you want to label these 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So 32.5 is gonna go somewhere here around. Make sure the bars have the same width. The bars should have the same width and they don't touch each other. So there's a space between them. And for O, for others, it was 22.5. So this is 20, so maybe somewhere here. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but so this is called the bar graph. At least when I look at it, say, okay, Republicans get the most or the largest number, and then Democrats, then others from the graph. Now keep in mind, the graph doesn't have to be always the way you see it. The largest one goes first, the next smaller, and the smallest. No, it could be the other way around, the smallest, middle, and then the largest. Or it could be smallest, largest, and middle. So there's no way to organize them. It stays as is. And that's what was done here. Notice how they did it. It doesn't have to go the same order as I did, as I said. I put RDO. Here they did DRO. It doesn't matter which one. It's up to you. There's no restriction, and I've never seen a question that says put this one first, this one next. So it's up to you. And notice how they did it. I put it percent-wise here on this vertical axis. Here they put it on their vertical axis. They used decimals. So either one is fine. So they went up by increment of 0.1. So it starts 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, all the way to 0, 5. And that's how they constructed the table. So in summary, this section talks about how we organize qualitative data, not quantitative, qualitative data. And usually the qualitative data is basically a list of things, not numbers. Things like they talk about Republican, Democratic here, and others. So this list or table that was given to us, we wanted to arrange it, organize it. So how do we organize it? Well, we looked at how often each one of them has been repeated, and then we got what we call frequency. The frequency tells us how often a given thing within the table has been repeated. And then from the frequency, we get the relative frequency. And we could use either the frequency or relative frequency to draw bar graphs. And then at the same time, I use relative frequency to sketch a pie graph. All these just to help us find out or organize the given data.